Of the fantasy football season. Here's a few players I look to sell and trade this week. The first guy, Puka Nacua of Los Angeles Rams. So right now, I'm not saying sell Nacua just for anything. Right now, it's got to be a nice haul or a great one-for-one deal. So far in the season, Nacua's gone out there and putting up huge numbers on the year. 39 catches, 501 receiving yards already. A touchdown on 52 targets. So right now, he's pretty much Cooper Kupp 2.0 for this Ram team. But the problem is Cooper Kupp, he could be back here in Week 5. For this Los Angeles Ram team, where obviously he's going to take targets, he's going to take looks away from here for Nacua, even though I think these two guys, great combination, even though they run a lot of the same routes and a lot of the schemes are ran for these guys to get them open. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Rams are going to use Cooper Kupp and Nacua, but definitely his numbers are going to go down, I think, with Cooper Kupp back in the lineup, and the targets are going to go down. So right now, while he's playing great football at a huge level, is Puka Nacua, where every game he's had double-digit fantasy points and already 500 yards more games, which is pretty much unheard of, and a good matchup versus Philly coming up that gives up the nice most fantasy points to receivers on the season. Right now, if you could get a nice 1-for-2 deal, you get a receiver in a back or Nacua for a stud back in a trade, I would do it. Because right now, like I said, I think his numbers take a hit with Cooper Kupp possibly returning here in Week 5. The next player is Gabe Davis of the Buffalo Bills. So Gabe Davis, he's been a touchdown-dependent player this season, and so far it's worked for him. Week 1, he didn't do much. Week 2 versus Vegas, he did have a big ball game, 92 yards on 6 catches with a touchdown. Week 3 at Washington, 1 catch, 35 yards, a touchdown made his day. And even Week 4 versus Miami, only 3 catches, 61 yards and a touchdown. So right now, he's been that big red zone threat for this Buffalo Bill team. Like I thought he would be last season, but last year he just couldn't get anything going. And even this season, in 4 games for Gabe Davis, the yards really haven't been there. Only 220 yards, so no doubt about it. He's off to a better start, is Davis, than he was last season. But right now, he's not really a player that I think is going to keep it up. He's touchdown dependent and a big play dependent player for this Buffalo Bill team. So right now, while he's going out there making plays and putting up numbers, which I don't think it's sustainable, he's definitely a play I would look to sell and trade this week. The next play is Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. So Nico Collins, coming into the year, he definitely was on the radar for me as a sleeper. But so far this season in PPR leagues, he's had 2 ball games with 28 or more fantasy points. So him and CJ Stroud, the impressive rookie, have a good rapport, no doubt about it. They're making plays and playing good football. But I think a lot of teams, they're just not paying attention to Nico Collins. And now they're going to start zeroing in on him and seeing if he can make adjustments. So Week 5 at Atlanta, it's a pretty tough matchup on paper where the Falcons do give up the 5th least amount of fantasy points to receivers on the season. So Nico Collins, it's pretty much been one decent game, a great game, a bad game, a great game. So the last 2 games, Week 2 versus Indy, 7 catches, 146 yards, a touchdown. Week 3 at Jacksonville, 2 catches, 34 yards. And the explosion, Week 4 versus Pittsburgh, 7 catches, 168 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So right now, coming off a monster ball game, over 35 fantasy points in PPR leagues, here's Nico Collins. He's definitely a player I look to sell high. I'm not trading these guys just for anything. I think he keeps these numbers up as well. Here's Nico Collins, because he's making big plays and teams are going to make adjustments. They're going to focus in more on him, and we'll see if he could adjust to it. So right now, while he's playing great football, and I think the numbers are a little bit fluky, he's definitely a player I look to sell and trade this week. The next play is Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco coming off the biggest game of the season easily for him. In the last 2 weeks, he's starting to round into shape and get things going after he had off-season knee surgery before training camp. So Week 3 versus Chicago, 15 carries, 62 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 16 yards. In Week 4 at the Jets, he exploded in that one, 20 carries, 115 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 43 yards. So right now, good matchup coming up at the Minnesota Vikings here for Pacheco. But I think this Chief team, obviously the ball is going to be in Patrick Mahomes' hands more times than not. Right now, he's just got to find that number 1 target in the wide receiving core. He is Patrick Mahomes. And then Isaiah Pacheco, I think, is going to start losing a little bit of the carries. Right now, there's no one stepping up. Kadarius Toney hasn't done anything for this Kansas City Chief team. Rashee Rice, he's been up and down. He's the rookie this season. Sky Moore, he hasn't done anything. So besides Travis Kelce, that second guy hasn't stepped up in that offense. So right now, Pacheco, he's getting more work over the last few weeks. Like I said, that knee injury is definitely healed up after having surgery in training camp. But right now, I just don't think it holds up. And after coming off a big ball game at a good New York Jet defense, this is a perfect time to sell Pacheco high. And he's a player I'd look to sell for a wide receiver who's been up and down so far this season. Like even Pacheco and maybe an wide receiver who's just a bench piece for fantasy owners. For a Jalen Waddle could get a deal done, something like that. Next play is Justin Fields of the Chicago Bears. So Justin Fields, it's been a struggle for him the first 3 weeks of the season. And then week 4 versus the Broncos, he torched them in that one. 335 pass yards, 4 touchdowns, an interception, 4 carries, 25 yards, and a fumble loss. So this season, we really haven't seen the running ability of Justin Fields, where last season he was running loose. This year, 28 carries, 134 yards, and a rushing touchdown with 2 fumble losses. So right now, the numbers haven't been there for Fields. Offensive line, one of the worst offensive lines in the league here is the Chicago Bear offensive line. And Fields, he's going back to bad habits like he did last season, holding on to the football too long. Even though in week 4 versus Denver, he did get right, and it was his first career 300 passing yard game for Justin Fields. But this week here, pretty tough matchup versus middle of the pack Washington Commander team. So right now, while Fields is coming off that monster performance, and I think the 300-yard games are going to be few and far between for Justin Fields, he's definitely a play I'd look to sell high because, like I said, the first 3 weeks of the season, he really didn't do anything, and then all of a sudden, versus a Denver team, he comes out and has a good game. But now with Washington coming up, I think he could take a little bit of a step back. But then he has some favorable matchups once again versus Minnesota and Vegas. But this offensive line's bad. The play calling's been bad this season for Chicago. And if they're coming off a good game after the first 3 weeks he struggled, I think it's a perfect time to sell Fields because I just don't know what we're going to get out of him. Week in and week out, he could be one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks this season. Next play is Devon Achane for the Miami Dolphins. Achane, he's taken the league by storm over the last 2 weeks with monster performances, obviously, in fantasy weeks. Week 3, he got an opportunity with Salvon Ahmed out and Raheem Mostert and him splitting versus the Broncos. 18 carries, 203 rush yards, 2 touchdowns. 4 catches, 30 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then week 4 at Buffalo, a tough run defense. He went in there and he shredded them. 8 carries, 101 rush yards, 2 touchdowns. And he added 3 grabs for 19 yards. So right now he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. He's very quick and versatile in the running game in between the tackles, making men miss, is Devon Achane. But like I said, on these limited amount of carries, he's gone out there and he's put in a monster 2 weeks in a row. So right now with Raheem Mostert still over there in the backfield, Jeff Wilson coming back sooner than later off for IR. If I could get a monster wide receiver in a deal for Devon Achane, like a Keenan Allen or someone like even a Stephon Diggs, if someone's willing to give that up, then I would sell him. But if I can't get something who's been an elite wide receiver so far this season here, he's not a player I'm going to sell. I know these 2 games aren't sustainable on the amount of touches, getting something crazy like 11 yards per touch over the last 2 weeks. He is Devon Achane. But like I said, he's a dynamic offense where they're just worried about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Tua in the passing game, where the running lanes have been open and this offensive line for Miami is opening up the holes in the running game. And he does have a good matchup coming up in Week 5 versus the New York Giants. But anyway, right now, if you could get a big-time wide receiver or even a 2-for-1 deal for Achane, this would be time to sell him. I'm not going to sell him off just for anything because I think he is obviously a very talented running back. But right now, if you could get a big deal for him, this would be the time to sell him at peak value. And the final player I look to sell and trade here is Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. And Derrick Henry came off a monster ball game, but I think the explosiveness has gone down a little bit here for Henry. This offensive line, one of the worst lines in the league. And so far this season, he's had 2 good games and pretty much 2 mid to bad ball games. So the last couple weeks here for Henry, week 2 versus the Chargers, 25 carries, 80 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 15 yards. Week 3, Cleveland, 11 carries, 20 yards. And week 4 versus Cincinnati, a big game, 2 passing yards on a touchdown on the goal line. 22 carries, 122 yards, a rushing touchdown, and 1 catch, 11 yards. So Tajay Spears, he's not going anywhere as well in this backfield, playing a lot of snaps, playing the passing down snaps is Spears for this Tennessee Titan team. And a guy on 3rd down, and like I said, Derrick Henry has a lot of miles on his body, a lot of carries, and he's almost hitting that 29, 30-year-old mark, Henry, is where running backs definitely start to fall apart. So this week here, he definitely has a matchup at a team at the Indianapolis Colts that he's owned throughout his NFL career. So right now, with a monster ball game versus Cincinnati, and most likely another big game here at the Indianapolis Colts, that's when I would sell Derrick Henry off. Like I said, this Titan team, more times than not, they're going to be trailing in a majority of ball games, I believe, this season. And obviously, that's not Henry's bread and butter. When they're down in games and have to throw. Like I said, he's not a good wide receiver out of the backfield, and Spears has been taking more of those snaps. So right now, Henry, he's been still pretty solid this year for fantasy owners. But like I said, there's going to be games coming up over the next few weeks after next week where I believe they're going to be trailing, or it's going to be a tight game, and there won't be a lot of running lanes for Derrick Henry. So right now, while he's playing good football, and most likely we'll have another monster game in Indianapolis, you could sell him off on peak value, because we even saw last season there were some monster games with Henry and some games he didn't show up, and so far we've seen it this year as well. So that's a few players I look to sell and trade in week 10 of the fantasy football season.